today I'll be sewing a beautiful summer dress with you. The dress is going to have a square neckline and puffy sleeves and a tiered short skirt. It will be the dress of our dreams, well, at least of my dreams. The design is inspired by a brand called Selkie. I am pretty sure you have heard about them before, especially if you've been following any sewing YouTube channels recently. Selkie's designs are very fairy-like. They use a lot of organza, but for my dress today I decided to go with a more real-life friendly version of that. So I decided to buy this beautiful crisp white linen. I got it from a UK online store called Fabric Godmother, but it is a very basic fabric that I am sure you can get in any kind of fabric store. Linen does have some really great properties to it. It does absorb moisture really well and then also transports it to your surroundings, which is exactly what you want when it's a hot, sweaty day outside. I will also be taking a new approach to the sewing process by creating a mock-up version of the dress before I actually go ahead and cut out any pattern pieces of my more expensive shell fabric. I haven't done this before, but it does sound quite sensible, so why not give it a try? I think this is everything I wanted to tell you, so let's just jump straight in.
Alright, first let's get some inspiration. My go-to source is Pinterest, like for most of you out there. I will link my profile in the description box, as I think I might have a few pins that you might enjoy. I then sit down and draw out all of my ideas. As I mentioned, this dress is going to have a square neckline. I think that they are quite flattering and I like the 90s vibe that they give. It's also going to have super-sized puff sleeves. The skirt will be cut in 2 panels, which will give it a tiered look. I do have a bit wider hips than shoulders, so making this a cut that looks good on me will be the main challenge of this project. The idea is that the puff sleeves will help bring balance to the fit. Once I am happy with the design, I go ahead and cut out the pattern pieces. I recently started working with a basic bodice sloper, which I alter and reuse for many different designs. I will link a video by Kim Dave that I used to create it in the description box. The first steps of creating the mock-up were to prep the pattern pieces and sew in the bodice darts. I also had to cut out facing for the back piece of the bodice to be able to add the elastic feature, which I forgot in the pattern cutting process. In the actual dress there will be facing for both front and back bodice to be able to get a crisp neckline.
Okay, so I just now pressed the back part of my calico mock-up pattern piece. I folded over the edges and pressed them down, and to get a nice crisp corner here, you will have to cut the excess fabric so that you can fold it over and then it folds nicely like this. Look at how ridiculously wide this back part looks. We are now going to sew a straight stitch about 1.5 centimeters below the edge here, which is going to create a tunnel where we can insert an elastic, and this elastic is then going to pull together this back piece. So we have enough space to jump in and out of it without having to add a zipper.
Here you can see me adding a straight stitch about 1.5 centimeters below the back neckline, which created a tunnel for the elastic. As I felt like I didn't have the right kind for this feature, I cut 2 pieces, identical in length, and stitched them together to create one stronger piece. I did that by pulling the elastic while I worked it through my machine. Pull and sew, pull and sew. After I was finished, I used the safety pin method to pull the elastic through the tunnel. I secured both ends with a simple stitch. The back piece of the mock-up is finished. I then pinned the front and back bodice pieces together along the side and shoulder seams and sewed them in, right sides together. After a good press, this was the result. On to the skirt. The first thing here was to prep for the gathering. Set your machine to the longest stitch available. For me, that was 5. Sew 2 straight stitches parallel to the upper edges of the lower panels of the skirt, since this is the part that you want to gather. Don't lock them as you will need the loose ends later.
Eine Pausenstärkung.
Separate the end pieces of thread of your seams. Take the 2 bottom thread pieces and tie them in a knot. You will then use the 2 top thread pieces to pull and push your fabric to gather it. Once that was done, I pinned the upper and gathered lower panels together for each the front and back skirt. I laid them flat and added the pocket pieces.
Okay, so this is the back piece, and now, hold on. This is the front piece, and now we will put them right sides together, which they're not right now. We'll have to do that again. And then sew all the way around here, and down here. And let me tell you something, I can already sense that this is going to be too big. But this is why we are making mock-ups these days.
And we have a finished skirt with pockets. While I was watching a very important televised funeral, I pinned together the bodice and skirt pieces. I'd gathered the sleeves and added a simple cuff to give them a nice finish.
This is the part where I say I don't want it. I'm stronger than I've been before. Right? That makes sense. Gosh, that's how I like a sleeve. Puffy. Puffy. That's one puffy sleeve. Okay, you guys, this is the part where it gets exciting because we can make our first alterations to make this look really cute. Because right now it is a bit weird and a bit wonky, but we're going to change that now. So,
And this is where my battery died. I kept talking for about 5 more minutes before I realized, but do not fret, I will explain everything again. The first thing I knew I wanted to do was to lower the neckline by about 4 centimeters. All in all, the seams of the skirt were too low for me and accentuated the widest parts of my hips, which was not what I was aiming for. I decided to move them upwards by about 5 to 6 centimeters. The sleeve was perfect as it was, but I had to make the armhole of the bodice bigger in order to be able to move around more easily. I didn't make a decision on the length of the skirt, as this is something I usually do as a very last step in the actual dress. Since it was already mid-afternoon at this point and the sun was shining, I went out to get a few more bits and bobs that I needed to finish the dress. I live close to a popular fabric store street here in London and roamed the shops. I got this beautiful silk chiffon for the lining of the skirt, as I think it would have been a tiny bit see-through without it. It is very sheer, but just enough to give the skirt its needed opaqueness. I also got some fresh air and fresh inspiration, but more on that in my next video. The next day, I took apart the mock-up and applied all the alterations I wanted to make. I then put them flat on paper and cut out my new and improved pattern pieces, which I used for my shell fabric. For the lining, I cut a very simple panel from the silk chiffon, which will be gathered on top. This looks way simpler than it was, as chiffon is very slippery. Now it's time to sew the actual dress. I followed all the same steps as with the mock-up, with the benefit of being a lot faster since I had already done them once before. I prepared all the pieces for the bodice, sewed the darts and added the facing. To get the crisp corners, I nipped the seam allowance like so and flapped the facing over to press it flat. To finish off this step, I understitched the seam allowance towards the facing. Here I added the straight stitch 1.5 centimeters below the back neckline to create the tunnel for the elastic. After threading it in with a safety pin and stitching it secure, the back piece was finished. Now for the correct fusion of the front and back bodice pieces. Take the shoulders and flap the shell and facing open. Pin them right sides together and sew them. This will give you a beautiful result.
One thing I've noticed is that both sides of the linen, so the right and the left side, look identical. So I've come to believe that it doesn't have a right or left side. You can use either. I don't really think it matters in terms of what it looks like.
I then went on to gather the lower skirt panels, sewed them together with the upper skirt panels and overlocked the raw edges. I prepped the sleeves exactly as I did with the mock-up since I didn't want to make any alterations. We now have all the parts of the dress prepared: bodice, skirt and sleeves. On to assembly.
Okay, so now we are going to close the side seams of our bodice piece, and we make it so that the outside as well as the inside look really beautiful and nice, and we don't have to overlock any raw edges because the raw edges are hidden in the inside of the bodice. So we are going to do this by laying our bodice flat in front of us and then taking the shell part of the front piece and the shell part of the back piece and then putting it right sides together like so. Once you've done that, you take the facing part of the front and the facing part of the back and put them right sides together as well. It's gonna look a bit funky like this, but you will see once you turn everything around the way it's supposed to be, it's gonna look really good and clean. So once you've done that, you take everything and then turn it right side out, and then you have a beautifully closed bodice. So I just closed off the side seams, and now I stitched 2 parallel stitches along the line where I want the back part of my bodice to end. I'm gonna cut away this excess here, and now I'm gonna thread through some elastic.
I threaded the elastic through the prepared tunnel and secured it on each side, as I did in the mock-up version of the bodice. I then cut off the excess seam allowance, which finalized the bodice. To add the sleeves, I first measured the circumference of the armhole, which helped me to determine in which length to gather the sleeves. I sewed them in and overlocked the raw edges to give it all a clean finish. I put together the front and back skirt with their pocket pieces, as I did in the mock-up version, a few stitches on my machine, and voila, we're almost finished. On the last day, I focused on the lining and correct assembly of all the parts. The lining was very simple and only required 1 seam, which I decided would be the center back. I overlocked the hem of the lining skirt and all the raw seam allowance of the shell skirt. Once all of this was done, I sat down to pull all of it together. After a bit of contemplation, I pinned it together the wrong way first, but luckily figured out before sewing it. I just put that on wrong. I need to do it again. But that's fine. You know, we learn from our mistakes. We need to sandwich the bodice in between the right side of the skirt and the right side of the lining. So that means, hold on, this basically goes in here, in between the two skirts, and then we need to pin it in here so that when we turn it all around, we have the two right sides out. That's what we need to do. The lining was in, the hemline was fixed, I was finished. And now for the final look. This turned out to become a real Selkie meets Bridgerton moment, and I am here for it. The puffy sleeves, the half-moon shaped seam in the skirt, the mullet hemline. I really enjoy the simplicity of the dress. It is super easy to slip into it and doesn't require many accessories. If there is one thing that I would improve, it would be to make the bodice a bit narrower, which weirdly I didn't pick up in the mock-up sewing process. Regardless, I can't wait to hit the pubs, parks and Sohos of this city with this and love the effortless look. I hope you enjoyed this video and were able to get some inspiration from it. How do you feel about the final result? Let me know how you like it in the comments. I would be super happy about a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. I will upload new sewing content here regularly, so if you're looking for inspiration, DIY input, or simply want to relax while watching somebody else craft, this is the channel for you. See you soon!